What if a drug could help paralyzed patients walk again? Not in decades, but now. A new Brazilian experimental medication is showing exactly that. For decades, spinal cord injury meant one thing: adaptation, not repair. Most people assume paralysis is irreversible. Once the nerves are damaged, the brain signals cannot get through right. In this video, we will look at what is actually changing. A compound called polylaminin, developed over more than 20 years by researchers in Brazil, and why early results are being called promising, but still experimental. First, the basics. Worldwide, hundreds of thousands of people live with spinal cord injury. Spinal cord injuries usually happen after trauma, car accidents, falls, sports injuries, or other events that crush, stretch, or cut the cord. Doctors often classify the injury as complete or incomplete, meaning whether any signal at all can still get through below the level of the damage. The higher up the injury in general, the more of the body is affected. An injury in the neck can lead to tetraplegia. One lower down may affect mainly the legs. So when we talk about spinal cord injury, we're talking about a spectrum of severity and location. But in every case, the core problem is broken communication between the brain and the body. The impact on daily life, mobility, self-care, work and family is profound. And until now, the medical community has had very few tools that address the root cause rather than the consequences. Tetraplegia, sometimes called quadriplegia, means paralysis affecting both arms and legs, and often the trunk, usually after a severe injury to the cervical spine. Paraplegia refers to paralysis that mainly affects the legs and lower body, often after an injury to the thoracic or lumbar spine. In both cases, the nerve fibers that carry commands from the brain to the muscles are damaged or severed. Today's approved treatments often focus on preventing further damage and managing complications. They do not rebuild the broken path. That is why spinal cord injury has remained one of the most challenging areas in medicine. Once the wiring is cut, restoring it has seemed out of reach. For over 100 years, medicine has treated spinal cord injury as irreversible. What does medicine offer today? In the acute phase, the focus is on stabilizing the spine, sometimes with surgery, and preventing further damage. After that, the mainstay is rehabilitation, physical therapy, occupational therapy, assistive devices, and psychological support. Many people with spinal cord injury learn to use wheelchairs, adaptive tools, and assistive technology to maximize independence. These can improve quality of life and help people adapt. But there is still no approved drug that actually rebuilds the broken nerve pathways. So when we hear about a compound that aims to do exactly that, to help nerves regrow and reconnect, we are talking about a potential paradigm shift, not just another pill for symptoms. So why is this drug different? Imagine a bridge that reconnects two islands. The current standard of care is like reinforcing the shores. This experimental approach tries to help the nervous system lay a new path across the gap. Nerves, like other cells, need a physical and chemical environment that tells them where to grow. Without that, they stall at the lesion. Polylaminin is designed to provide that environment. The drug is called polylaminin. Polylaminin is an experimental compound that, in early tests, has been shown to stimulate the regeneration of damaged nerve fibers in the spinal cord. It was developed by Brazilian scientists led by biologist Tatiana Silho de Sampaio at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, UFRJ. The work took more than 20 years. The compound is derived from a protein found in the extracellular matrix, laminin, which helps nerve cells orient the growth of new axons, the cables that carry signals from the brain to the body. In a healthy body, laminin and other molecules in the tissue around nerves act like guide rails. They help growing axons find their way to the right target. But at the site of a spinal cord injury, the environment changes. Scar tissue forms, and several molecules are released that actually block or repel nerve growth. So even if some nerve fibers try to regrow, they hit a hostile zone. Polylaminin is a polymeric form of laminin, meaning many laminin-like units linked together, that is designed to provide a kind of bridge or track across that hostile zone. Researchers have been studying this idea in the lab for years. Can we give the cord a structure that encourages regrowth instead of leaving it to face the scar alone? It is not simply an anti-inflammatory drug. It is meant to give the nervous system a structure it can use to rebuild, instead of only relieving symptoms. Polylaminin acts by supporting the regeneration of nerve connections, essential for restoring signals from the brain to the body. Lab studies showed nerve regrowth. Early human tests showed regained voluntary movement in some participants. No miracle-controlled scientific progress. By that we mean the results have been obtained in structured trials, with protocols, ethics approval, and reporting, not in sensational one-off stories. That is how we tell the difference between hope and hype. What did the studies actually show? In animal models, dogs with spinal cord injuries recovered voluntary movement after weeks of treatment with polylaminin. Animal studies are a necessary first step. They help researchers understand dosing, safety, and whether the mechanism works in a living spinal cord before moving to human trials. In humans, clinical studies are still in an early phase. A pilot study reported return of voluntary motor contraction after complete spinal cord injury in some participants. Not everyone responded the same way. Recovery did not happen overnight. It unfolded over weeks of therapy. Researchers have reported these findings in preliminary form, including in a pilot human study. So when you hear headlines about patients moving again, the full picture is promising but preliminary. Larger and longer trials will be needed to confirm how many people might benefit and to what degree. Some participants showed partial recovery of voluntary movement in the upper limbs or in part of the legs. These results are promising, but preliminary. There is still no broad regulatory approval and no proof of universal efficacy. What does partial movement mean in practice? It can mean different things for different people. For some, it might be the ability to move a finger or to grip an object again. For others, it might be voluntary contraction in a leg muscle or the ability to take steps with support. The timeline is typically weeks of treatment, not days, and the degree of recovery varies. Keeping expectations realistic is important. No one is claiming that everyone will walk independently tomorrow, but even partial return of voluntary control can open the door to more independence and a better quality of life. For someone who hasn't moved a finger in years, even a small contraction is not small. Scientists are still learning which patients respond best and under what conditions, which is why the next phases of research are so critical. How does it work? And here's what makes this different. When the spinal cord is injured, neurons stop transmitting signals the way they used to. Nerve fibers break. The line between brain and muscles goes dead. Current approved treatments do not typically rebuild that line. They may limit damage, reduce inflammation, or support rehabilitation, but they do not guide new nerve growth across the lesion. Polylaminin, in laboratory and early clinical work, appears to form a kind of molecular rail. It helps guide nerve fibers toward their target and may help reestablish motor signals that were blocked. Think of it like patching a broken cable and rebooting the signal. This is not about a miracle. It's about rebuilding broken wiring. The compound is applied in the region of the spinal cord lesion, where it is intended to persist long enough to support the regrowth process. It is not a painkiller and not a muscle stimulant. It is a molecule that works at the level of neural regeneration, giving the nervous system a chance to rebuild critical pathways. In early trials, several patients have been able to regain voluntary movement or take small steps with support. We are not showing or identifying any patient. The point is that the phenomenon has been observed under controlled conditions. Respecting privacy and avoiding sensational footage is part of responsible science communication. Other approaches, like electrical stimulation or other drugs, are being studied worldwide. Polylaminin is one promising path among several. This video focuses on the Brazilian work and the science behind it. Now, the limits. Polylaminin is not yet approved by the FDA or ANVISA for broad use. It is still in the experimental phase. ANVISA has authorized phase 1 trials, which focus on safety and early signals, not general approval. Eligibility for future trials depends on the type and timing of injury. Only a physician can advise. Until larger trials and regulatory review are done, polylaminin remains experimental, not something you can request at the pharmacy. Not everyone responds. Long-term effects are still under study. That is normal for any new drug. We need time and more patients to understand both benefits and risks over many years. Scientists stress that more research is needed before any broad approval. Anyone considering participation in a trial should do so only through official channels and with full information from the research team and their own doctor. So what does this mean for the future? If the early signals hold up in larger trials, polylaminin could become an important option for spinal cord injury, a condition that today has very few treatments that actually restore function. The same kind of science could one day inform research in other areas of nerve damage, including other conditions where nerve regeneration is the goal. For now, the priority is to run those larger trials and let the data speak. The message from the scientists is clear. The results are hopeful, but more studies are needed before any broad approval or routine use. The work is happening at UFRJ, with involvement from partners such as Crystalia, and under the oversight of ethics committees and regulators. That is what gives the results credibility. Not hype, but structured, reported, regulated research. Independent replication and peer-reviewed publication will be the next steps to turn early hope into widely accepted medicine. Why does research in Brazil matter? For Brazilians, having a clear regulatory path through ANVISA means that if polylaminin eventually proves safe and effective, trials and potential access can happen within the country. For the rest of the world, every validated approach adds to the global toolkit for spinal cord injury. How long until we know more? That depends on how the next trials are designed and how quickly they recruit and report. Often we are talking about several years before larger Phase 2 or Phase 3 results are in. In the meantime, the team at UFRJ and their partners continue to publish and present their work so that the scientific community can follow and build on it. Recovering even partial voluntary movement can change daily life in concrete ways. More ability to use the hands, to transfer in and out of a chair, or to move with less assistance. It can reduce the need for round-the-clock care and open up options for work, hobbies, and social life. We are not talking about a miracle overnight, but about the possibility of regaining function that was thought to be lost for good. That possibility is what makes this line of research so important. For decades, paralysis meant permanence. Now, for the first time, science is asking a different question. What if the spinal cord can be repaired? And part of that story is coming from Brazil. If you want to follow this topic, look for updates from the institutions involved, such as UFRJ, or from peer-reviewed publications. Do not replace your doctor with a YouTube video. Any decision about joining a trial or trying an experimental treatment must be made with a qualified physician who knows your case. This channel is for education, not for prescribing or recommending specific treatments. If you want more updates on this and other medical breakthroughs, subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave a comment if you want to see more on spinal cord injury or neural regeneration. This video is for educational purposes only. It is not medical advice. Polylaminin is an experimental treatment and is not approved for general use. Decisions about any treatment for spinal cord injury must be made with a qualified physician. This content does not replace professional medical care or participation in a clinical trial under proper supervision.